You're listening to Mentoring Developers. How a new person, a person who has a couple of years experience perhaps, how can they put together a conference proposal that has a chance of success?
Yeah, absolutely. So first I'll say that often the best teacher for a concept for someone who's new is someone who is a person who's learned it recently. A lot of times, I can't count the number actually of conference talks I've been to that were meant to be for beginners, but they were taught by someone who was so far removed from being a beginner that person could not put themselves back in that mindset. And so they explained things in ways that people who actually were new and actually were beginners couldn't follow. And this is a problem you see not just in tech, of course. You see this everywhere, right? Everyone's had the college professor that just spewed impenetrable stuff and they couldn't quite figure out what was going on because the professor is assuming, a certain amount of context that often the students don't have. And we have the same problem in development. And so I think that new developers are often in a great position to explain concepts, anything that they found confusing the first time they looked at it. There is likely to be a bunch of other people that find it confusing in exactly the same way. And I can't do that talk because I don't remember being confused by it. Right. And so I've lived with sort of these ideas of things like MVC, like what are the layers of a web app? Like all of these things I've lived with for so long that I don't really remember what it's like sometimes to be learning them. And I don't even notice the context that people require. And so having someone who can make that context explicit because they're closer to that place is really, really valuable. Now, that said, I think that a lot of people struggle with how do you find a topic to talk about? And I did and the one thing I will say about that, I find that to be the hardest, honestly, is coming up with a topic that people will be interested in. And for new developers, often what I tell them is, well, just think about, if you had come to this conference last year, what talk would you have wanted to see? And sort of go through the thought experiment of what was I thinking about this time last year? Like, what was I confused about? Oh, right. I was confused about how active record models generate SQL, how CSS helps you, how you can get CSS to help you to lay out in columns, right? And so they can think back and they can think like, oh, okay, I would have wanted to see that talk. And if you wanted to see it last year, I guarantee you there's someone that wants to see it this year. In fact, there's probably more people that want to see it this year than last year. So idea generation is one aspect of it. And then the second aspect is thinking about how you put together what they call an abstract, which is like a little paragraph about what your talk is going to be about. And that's usually what goes in the program of a conference, right? So people who are at the conference will be looking at the program to decide what talks to attend. And so you need to basically sell them in this paragraph. And then usually in a conference proposal, there's that. And then there's also usually at least one or two sections that don't make it into the program that are really just there for you to talk to the reviewers, the conference proposal reviewers about your talk and give them sort of extra information that you don't have space for in the abstract because the abstract's usually quite small. And so the biggest tip that I think that people often miss is that you want to allow your reader, which in this case is the person who's at the conference, you want them to understand what it is they'll be able to do when they walk out of your talk that they couldn't do walking in. And so write title and the abstract from the point of view of what will an attendee get out of being at this talk. And a lot of conference proposals I see from folks who are new to conferences focus on they write it in terms of the speaker. So they'll say things like, in this talk, I will present 3 different ways to find objects in active record. And to be perfectly honest, the people that are at the conference don't care about you as a speaker, right? What they care about is them. And so a much more effective way to say something like that would be like, in this talk, you will learn 3 different ways to find objects in active record, which will allow you to do whatever, right? And so you really need to be explicit and tell them, like, here's what you can do with this. Here's why you should come. Why should you want to learn about this? And that a lot of people miss that, right? You'll see a talk where it's just like, in this talk, we'll learn about Swift. And you're just like, okay, but why do I want to learn Swift, right? What am I going to get out of it? And so that works on the reviewers also, right? Like the reviewers need to know why it is that people would attend that talk. And the reviewers are really trying to put together a program that will make people buy tickets. right? That is usually their goal, either to buy tickets or to show up or to, be excited about the sponsors and what have you. And so they are trying to build a program not necessarily out of, around a series of set topics, but they're trying to build a program that people will read about and then be excited about seeing. And so if you write your proposal in terms of what the attendee will get out of it, then it's much easier for the reviewer to be like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. Like if they read that, they're totally going to show up and buy a ticket. And so I think that's the secret right there is really you're writing for two audiences. You're writing for the reviewers and you're writing for the attendees, but really the same point of view works with, and the point of view is what will an attendee be able to do if they see your talk that they can't do right now.
So I think one way of looking at it would be to say, imagine yourself in the shoes of your audience and see what pain they have in right now. So for example, how does Active Record work the database? Does anybody care? If nobody cares, even though it might be interesting to you, if nobody cares, then it's probably not a good topic.
Right, exactly. And I think there's different... I think that people will be more or less interested depending on how you talk about it as well. So, for example, if you're like, well, who cares about Active Record? Maybe they don't care because they don't really understand what it means, right? So if you're like, hey, have you ever wanted to be able to do a query of 8 million rows in less than a quarter of a second? If so, you should learn about Active Record and how it makes its SQL statements.
Perhaps all of us should learn copywriting skills before you write proposals.
Yeah. Well, it certainly helps you improve them. I think as developers, often writing is not something that we focus on when we're in school. Now, it's different now because we're having a lot of folks coming into the industry who have been doing other things before. And so a lot of them do have great writing skills. But it's not something that our schooling tends to focus on. And I think that doing conference talks is a good way to work on that, in addition to things like blog posts and so on.
So there's a conference proposal, but there's another part of it is to establish yourself as somebody who can actually deliver. So you have to have some kind of profile. People should be able to look at you and say, yeah, well, he's good and he can do it or she can do it. So how do you recommend somebody goes about that?
So you end up with sort of it seems like what you're alluding to is kind of a chicken and egg problem where like you need to be able to prove that you can do a conference talk. But in order to do that, you need to do a conference talk, right?
Or something else, you can...
Right, exactly, yeah.
Anything that shows that you can deliver, you have the knowledge and you have the skills. I guess skills you do need to... You can't really prove your speaking skills until you speak, but at least you could show that you have the knowledge. It's hard to do it when you're starting out.
Yeah, and I would say that the main thing that was helpful for me, and I've seen this work for other people too, is that I would first write a blog post about the thing that I wanted to do the talk on. And you would think that would mean that like people are no longer interested in the talk because they could just go read the blog post. But that is actually never the case, pretty much. Some people will never read a blog, but they'll watch the heck out of any kind of conference video. And other people will never watch videos, but they will read anything. And so just because your information is in one medium doesn't mean you can't put it into another one. And if you can write a coherent blog post, that's a pretty good signal that you at least have some English composition skills, that you can write an essay that holds together, that you can construct a narrative and keep it going throughout the body of a blog post. And that actually is a good way to convince them that, hey, I could construct a narrative for a conference talk and keep it going the entire time that I'm doing the talk. And so having a blog post on the same topic is often very helpful. The other thing that I think is really helpful is to have some kind of video clip, even if it's just a few minutes, that you put up on YouTube or something, of you talking about something technical. And it could be this proposal, like just, turn on your webcam for a moment and like talk about why you're so excited about this topic and just upload it and then put it in the section where reviewers can see it. Because what that does is it lets them know that like, oh, this person can put together an English sentence and say it out loud, which, is one of those things that like, you never know, right? You're looking at someone, if it's someone you don't know personally, which will be the case most of the time when you're looking at conference proposals, then you really have no idea whether they could even get up in front of can they even put an entire paragraph in English together and say it out loud? And so I think that even just having something that seems very simple, just like 3 or 4 minutes of like, let me tell you about this topic and why I'm excited about it, even if it's not scripted, it can give the reviewers the sense of like, okay, this person can, they're clearly very excited about this, and they can put together a sentence and say it in a way that other people can understand. And if that's backed up with a blog post on the same topic, then that vastly reduces the risk for the reviewers, right? The reason that people sometimes don't get chosen for conference talks is because it just seems every time you choose a new speaker over a speaker that will do at least an okay job, right? You're taking a risk. And so as a new speaker, your goal should be to try and lower the risk for the conference for picking your talk.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening.
For show notes and transcripts, visit us at mentoringdevelopers.com.